Hi. I decided that I'm going to do the personalized part of the Capricorn episode as a video this week. I'm already late posting the podcast, so why not make it more complicated and add a video component? Um, I really just want to try it out and see how it goes. Now, I'm not used to recording this all in one shot, so it might be a little sticky. I have a tendency to say something and be like, no, that's not it, and like go back and try it again, sort of like iterating on it. So in the video, you're going to see me do that in real time, whereas in the podcast, it tends to be a little edited down, believe it or not. Okay, so here we go. We're going to talk about how Capricorn affects each of the signs. Okay, what I'm trying to say is, see, it's already happening. We're talking about today how Capricorn characterizes the parts of your life based on ideally your rising sign, but you can listen to this for your sun sign if you don't know your rising sign. So your chart contains all 12 houses, and as we go through this series, we're talking about how the different signs characterize those different parts of your life. So we're starting today with Capricorn and Capricorn rising. If you're Capricorn or Capricorn rising, Capricorn characterizes your first house of identity. So you identify with the traits of Capricorn. I've done that so many times on the podcast, just loop the description. Okay, so we've talked about the traits of Capricorn a little bit so far in this episode. There is a gritty realism to Capricorn that is really, to me, the defining characteristic of the sign. There's a sense of humor that's kind of grim. There's the capacity to work with what is around you, what is available to you, and to get things done. I'm finding it's a little different to talk into my face than it is to just kind of be looking around and thinking about it as I'm describing it. Okay, so to have a Capricorn first house means that your identity is settling in this place of realism and capacity to work with the material circumstances that you have been provided with. Obviously, we talk a lot about money and achievement with Capricorn. I think a lot of people are alienated by that, as I said earlier. But also, there's the thread that we can touch into with Capricorn and money is that the capacity to live life well and do exactly what you want to do with the resources that you have, that is a very Capricornian capacity. If you're a Capricorn first house, you have been experiencing a lot of shifts in your identity. And those shifts have been with the South Node releasing things that aren't working in your identity anymore, especially where that has to do with the Capricornian themes of achievement for achievement's sake, of working yourself to the point that you're not enjoying the fruits of your labor, that kind of stuff. The whole world has been going through that, but that's been deeply affecting a Capricorn rising's identity and sense of self. On top of that, since 2008, so for a long ass time, you have been working through the Pluto and Capricorn issues. This is a major characterizing energy of your life, of an entire era of your life, where your identity is being excavated and things are being pulled to the surface. And you probably don't even know what it feels like to be you without that influence at this point because it's been there for so long. But if you can remember back before 2008, it might have been a really different vibe to what was going on for you. So we talked about the Cancer 7th house in the last episode, so I think I will skip that, but I'll just point back to when you're a Capricorn or a Capricorn rising, you identify more with the disciplined, get it done side of taking care of things. and you look more in your partners for the caring, nurturing, taking care of people kind of stuff. Um, yeah, but you contain both, because if you have the polarity, you contain both ends of it. Okay, let's move on to Sagittarius and Sagittarius rising. I do this a lot. I've been doing yoga and I am just constantly doing the prayer hands. Okay, Sagittarius and Sagittarius rising. Capricorn is your second house, which is your house of self-worth and value, and it also relates to how you make money in the world. As I've been doing this series, I've been thinking a lot about how second houses are a little bit cruel. It's the nature of self-worth and value, because your second house is always the sign right after you, which is always a sign that you don't identify with quite as much. It's like a half step different from you, which makes it pretty hard to understand. Same thing with your 12th house. It's like a half step behind you. So a Sagittarius is looking at an identity that's all about exploration and growth and learning new things and expansion, and then tends to value themselves and find their value in how they get stuff done and how they make things happen and how they work and how they achieve. And there's a tension in that. There is a tension in every single second house because of this effect of like, it's a half step different from the thing you're identifying with. And so to be a Sagittarius or Sagittarius rising, identity in this creative, expansive space, and then self-worth and value coming in the part of your life where you get things done, you work within what's been provided to you, you understand that you're going to die and that you have a limited amount of time to do what you need to do. People can see this playing out if they're doing really well with their second house. They're a together Sagittarius, right? They're not as scattered as some of our mutable impulses can tell us to be. If a Sagittarius isn't doing so well with their second house, they maybe feel the tension really intensely between this way of valuing themselves and their identity, and they feel like they're not measuring up as much. But the real thing to understand about Capricorn, or I think just in making peace with the Capricorn part of our lives in general, is that we're not being asked in this part of our lives to just work ourselves to death at all. At all. All we're being asked to do in this part of our lives is do the best with what we've got. And come back to the Capricorn genius for doing the best with what we've got. So advice to Sagittarius and Sagittarius risings. I'm a Sagittarius sun. I feel this to some extent. Focus on doing the best with what you've got. Try to pull back from achievement for achievement's sake. That's everybody, and we've all been learning it with the South Node in Capricorn, but when it plays into your self-worth and your value, you know, it has a little extra sting to it. Okay. Again, Scorpio and Scorpio rising, Capricorn, third house. Again, from doing this series for a minute, I have been realizing that I really just hate describing cadent houses. Cadent houses are, whatever. I'm not going to try to explain cadent houses right now. They're parts in the chart where, like, if you were standing in your first house, you'd have a hard time seeing them. They sort of like are a little bit invisible, and they tend to be the least emphasized parts of your character and your personality. So when I get to describing third houses and sixth houses and kind of ninth houses and definitely 12th houses, I'm always like, you know, I don't know if you're going to care about this or if it's going to connect very deeply, but it's still helpful to understand that these cadent houses of ours are characterized by certain energies, especially if you have planets and placements in the cadent houses. Then they become a little more resonant and they pop out a little bit more for you. So that being said, Scorpio's third house is characterized by Capricorn. The third house is the house of our daily communications, the little rabbit trails that we follow through our community as we go throughout our day-to-day lives, and of our siblings and our family relationships that are not with our parents or our ancestry. They're just aunts, uncles, cousins, the way we experience our family in its extended form. So most of the time for me, I experience third house transits generally as having a lot to do with either my sister or people who kind of fill this sisterly role in my life. So siblings definitely can be just a big focus of third house transits and stuff that happens in the third house. But also a little harder to wrap our heads around is this way that we show up to our community on a daily basis, the way that people are perceiving us as we walk through our daily lives, the repeated patterns of our daily lives. And for a Scorpio rising, you might be showing up to your day-to-day life appearing as a Capricorn. Maybe you seem to have a grim understanding of the realities of life. That's very Scorpionic. Also, you might have that sort of grim sense of humor of a Capricorn showing up mostly in your day-to-day communications and the people that you're talking to on a regular basis, which is a fun thing about Scorpio. And then, keep an eye out for either Capricornian siblings or Capricornian sibling-like people showing up in your life, or even having a Capricorn attitude toward the people who fill those roles for you. So for example, your siblings might see you as being very put together and knowing what to do in different situations. Okay, so that's the third house. Take it or leave it. All right. Libra or Libra rising, Capricorn, fourth house. So some of these I kind of think through before I get to it, and some of them I just on the spot do it. And I usually don't think through the major angle houses because I always think I'm going to have something immediately to say. And then sometimes I find that I don't. So give me just a moment here. Libra rising with the Capricorn fourth house leads to the Cancer 10th house. Okay, so for a Libra and a Libra rising, the fourth house, which is the house of home, origins, and roots, is characterized by the energy of Capricorn. It's characterized by the grim realities of life, doing the best with what you've got, survival, and sometimes it's even characterized by a lot of structure, sort of in response to those themes. As a result, so you can almost think of the fourth house as the way that you experience childhood, and then that sort of sprouts and blossoms into the rest of your chart, right? So as a result of experiencing childhood in this way, the Libra in their identity becomes very focused on diplomacy and making sure everybody gets along and gets their needs met. In their relationships, they look for the other end of that, the people who can protect them and take care of them, or take care of even the group, right? The Aries energy. And then in their career, they show up in this Cancer-like way of they're nurturing and taking care of people. So everything really sprouts out of the way we experience our childhoods in the fourth house. And then our moon has something to do with it and all that stuff. But the fourth house is the root. It's the root of the whole chart. So, yes, the last several years, you've been experiencing this release and letting go in ways that you relate to your roots and your origins, your family, and even your home. Your home that you have now might have changed, which changes in our homes that we live in as adults can kind of reflect these changes in the way we relate to our upbringing and where we come from. There's a reflective quality in that. So fourth house transits can lead to changes in your home environment, but often those changes in your home environment are a reflection of a change in the way you are rooted, a change in the way you relate to your roots and your origins. In general, fourth house is about how you experience childhood. And so siblings can have very different fourth houses based on how they experience their childhoods differently, right? And sometimes you find siblings who all have very similar fourth houses, but I guess that goes without saying. Sometimes they're the same, sometimes they're different. I was thinking earlier, this is what I thought about when I thought about the fourth house, instead of thinking about how it actually affects Libra, that one of the things about, if you're listening for your rising sign and your sun sign, you might think about hearing the fourth house for one and hearing the fourth house for the other, and thinking about how they characterize your childhood in different ways and the way you experience childhood in different ways. So if you were a Libra sun with a Sagittarius rising, that would mean that you were a Capricorn fourth house from your sun, and then in the real astrology from your rising sign, you would be a Pisces fourth house. And you could think about how maybe the dreamy Pisces stuff also characterized your fourth house in addition to that Capricorn stuff. So I recommend it the other way. Listen for your rising sign first and then get some extra detail from your sun sign. But you can kind of see the ways that different elements of your childhood are reflected in your sun sign and your rising sign if you listen for both. Just a note. Okay, moving on to Virgo, Virgo and Virgo rising. Capricorn, I'm going to say that again for the recording because I'm going to edit it. So, Virgo and Virgo rising. Capricorn characterizes your fifth house of creativity, fun, sexuality, and children. So this is the house where we express ourselves. It's the house where we take great joy in sharing who we are with the world. It's a great house. You can see, if you think through all of those different themes, creativity and sexuality and children and fun, that all of those things are sort of different ways of self-expression, different modes of self-expression. And self-expression is, in many ways, you can think of it as one of the main reasons to be alive. It's to find what's unique and special about you and share it with the world, and do that as a gift, right? There's overlap in the themes of Leo and the fifth house as well. So Virgo fifth house, the way that they're expressing and sharing who they are with the world, Virgo fifth house. Virgo with a Capricorn fifth house, the way that they're expressing and sharing themselves with the world is in the mode of Capricorn. It is realistic, a little bit grim, but along with that, the grim sense of humor that comes with it, right? The capacity to face into the dark parts of life and just get it done, just move through it. Virgo risings might even like to create art that involves like bones or dead flowers or things like literal references to death. Sometimes a Virgo rising's artistic sense and creative sense really like intersects with references to mortality. What else do I have to say about the Virgo fifth house? Honestly, I guess I would say that sometimes we experience transits in one part of the description of the house and sometimes in the other. So there are probably some Virgo risings who have experienced the shifts of the last several years with the South Node in Capricorn and the release of the Capricorn themes that aren't working. They might have experienced that something has really shifted in their creativity and their creative projects and the way that they create stuff and put it out into the world, right? Maybe they've let go of an idea that they should be constantly working. Or they might have had a big shift in the way they experience their sexuality and different things happening in their sexuality too. So again, just like we were talking about in the fourth house, things can reflect, right? A lot of the time, you can look at your life and you can see it happening in the different facets of the way the house is described. It's happening in your creativity and your sexuality. And maybe also you've had a child, or it's happening in the way you relate to your children. So, and there's just this reflective capacity happening between the themes. So yeah, there's also been the Pluto excavation and the Saturn realness. Any as we're talking about the Capricorn characterizing houses, like you have been experiencing changes in this part of your life, and hopefully, as we're moving towards the ends of some of these transits, you're starting to see some of the gifts and outcomes, at least in a tiny bit. You probably won't see them fully for a minute, but like you're starting to see a little bit of what those transits have brought to you. Okay. Once more, I'm clasping my hands, or not clasping. I got it in my head, but it like takes me a while to get to the next one. We did Libra, then we did Virgo, now we're at Leo. Leo and Leo rising. Capricorn characterizes your sixth house of service and of daily habits and day-to-day stuff that you do that ultimately affects your health. I have said this in many episodes. I'm going to say it again. The way you eat, the way you exercise, the way you either drink or do drugs or smoke or don't do any of those things, that's what you find in the sixth house, as well as the ways you are in service to other people. So often we find our employment situations in the sixth house. I would say somebody who's self-employed is probably a little less likely to see anything other than like customer relationships showing up in the sixth house. Because it has to do with like the ways that that you're in service to other people. And sometimes you can see not only volunteer work, but the ways that you kind of, even in your friendships or your family relationships, show up to serve other people. The sixth house, again, is a cadent house. So it is a little less visible in the character, not as strongly identified with for, in this case, the Leo or Leo rising. And so sometimes these descriptions aren't going to be like really, I don't know, where you're like, yeah, that's totally me, because actually this is a part of your life where you might not feel that identification as much, but this is the part of your life that Capricorn characterizes. And importantly, it is also the part of your life where you've been experiencing these huge changes in the last few years. So you might be more aware of it than you would be otherwise because of all those shifts. So to be a Leo or Leo rising with a Capricorn sixth house is to have the sort of grim realities, get down to business, make it happen, work with what you've got, energy of Capricorn, characterizing the part of your life that is about habits and that is about service. That can show up for a Leo or Leo rising in a way where they are kind of just very business-like about their employment or what they've got to do for others. And also it can show up as this is kind of a nice thing for a Leo or Leo rising, a structured approach to the things they do to support their health. I'm trying to think about like how that might go wrong or like not be reflected well for the Leo or Leo rising. And I feel like that would look like, it would look like the Capricorn freak out, where you like achieve for achievement's sake, you work yourself to death, that kind of stuff. That could show up in a Capricorn sixth house for Leo or Leo rising. In the last several years, you've been releasing the things that don't work in this part of your life. I would say that those themes I've referred to over and over again about working for work's sake without really knowing what the goal is or what you want to get out of it, that achievement for achievement's sake. You know, when I think about Leo, I think about like relationship to physical health and wellness and maybe some disorientation around that being released in the last several years as we've had the South Node there, along with a long-term excavation with Pluto and Capricorn of this part of your life, and having to face up to some realities and some serious restrictions as Saturn moves through this part of your chart. It's interesting. I don't know why I haven't really been thinking about this, but like yeah, for Leo and Leo rising, you'd expect that there would be some changes in the way they take care of themselves and their health over the last several years, and maybe over a longer period than that, but especially since 2017. Okay, if you are a Cancer or a Cancer rising, Capricorn characterizes your seventh house of intimate relationships and partnerships. This is a point where I would usually pause to gather my thoughts. I'll just make the timestamp later, and I'm going to think for a minute. You can look at the timestamp if you want to skip past me thinking, because I'm not editing this video. Okay. What do I want to tell Cancer about their Capricorn partnerships? Well, okay. Cancer and Cancer rising. Capricorn characterizes your seventh house of intimate relationships. Having Capricorn characterize your seventh house of intimate relationships points to, for the Cancer, the real importance of having a partner who is going to step up and take care of stuff with you. Cancer needs a responsible partner, a partner who recognizes that discipline and order are necessary, a partner that's going to kind of hold them in their need for nurturing and support and provide a little structure. So we talk about the first and seventh houses, the first house being the part of this axis that you identify with the most, that you bring into how you think of yourself the most, and then the seventh house representing the way you look for the completion of that axis in another person, because you don't identify with that polarity quite as much. So the Cancer Capricorn axis is about loving. It's about taking care of things well. As a Cancer or Cancer rising, you're identifying a little more with the emotional part of that, the nurturing part of that, the I'm going to tell people how loved they are part of that, and looking in your partners for the part of that that's like, I provide structure. I know that loving people well involves structure, rules. We have ways that we're going to do this, and we're not going to let it get out of hand. What is it that I am trying to explain here? You need structure, right? You're identifying more with the watery end of it. You need in your partner somebody who's going to be like, and here's the responsibility. So that's it. First and seventh houses, though, you always contain both ends of the spectrum. So as a Cancer rising, you contain that Capricorn yourself. It can be very helpful to remember that and to find the ways that you can bring that part of who you are in more, especially if it's a little uneven. If you feel like you're always in your water signness just kind of leaking all over the place and you're always looking to partners to hold you, it can be helpful to remember that you contain that structure as well. You can hold yourself too. You just have to bring in and allow yourself to identify with being structured and working with limited resources and making it happen for yourself. Oof, I hope that made sense. Okay, so in the last several years, as the South Node has been in Capricorn, you have been letting go of your ideas about partnership that haven't been working. Maybe you were looking for a type of responsibility in your partner that you recognized was a little out of balance. It wasn't kind of taking the whole picture into consideration. Or maybe you were looking for somebody who was achieving and like getting stuff done, but you weren't really thinking about what that meant. And like now you're coming into a healthier understanding of what does it mean for a partner to be responsible to me. And you're seeing that with a little more nuance and complexity than you were seeing it before. Also, Pluto has been excavating the way you relate to partners for a very long time. So You're all the way in that. And Saturn, as it's moved through this house of your chart since 2017, has been bringing limits and responsibility and hard lessons to you in this part of your life, the way that you relate to your partners. All right. That was Cancer, Gemini. Gemini and Gemini rising. Capricorn characterizes your 8th house. Okay. So, a Capricorn 8th house for Gemini. It is so the 8th house is the house of birth, death, and transformation. That's what I have named my practice after. I am an 8th house stellium, really strong 8th house Sagittarius stellium. So for me, this birth, death, and transformation concept is always happening in the realm of expansion and growth. Sorry, this does happen. This is why I'm not totally sure that the video thing is going to work, because my brain just short circuits sometimes. I'm going to try just doing the timestamp at a different time. Okay. Let me think for a minute. Gemini and Gemini rising. 8th house. Birth, death, and transformation. It's almost like self-explanatory. It's always the hardest. Remember that the 2nd house is Cancer. And the 8th house is Gemini. No, it's not. It's Capricorn. Okay. All right, I'll tell you what. Gemini and Gemini rising. I'm just going to start talking and see if it kind of unfolds for me. The 8th house it's not a Cadent house, but it is one of the ones that's hard to explain because it's very dark and mysterious. So Capricorn characterizes your 8th house of birth, death, and transformation. This is to shorthand that birth, death, and transformation theme. This house represents how we heal. So we come into the 8th house and we die to an old self and we are reborn in a new self. And for Gemini, that process is characterized by the energy of Capricorn. It's a get it done, make it happen, kind of no bullshit sort of way of healing. I'm reflecting on Geminis that I know as I'm talking about this. We don't see people's 8th houses playing out very clearly because this is an internal happening in the dark kind of process. But there is a Gemini tendency to, like, when they have to work through something, it is with Capricornian efficiency. Almost because they just don't want to fuck with it for longer than they have to. Damn it, I'm going to have to edit that out of the podcast. They make you mark it as explicit if you swear. It really sucks. Okay, so anyway. Oh, this is a mess. So that's it. I'm going to stick with that. It's a difficult, challenging house. It happens in a Capricorn style for Gemini. Now, maybe a little more interesting. In the last several years, as we've had the South Node in Capricorn, and we've been releasing all of these Capricorn things that don't work, the Gemini process of healing has been transforming and changing. So the way that you approach needing to let go of something old and kind of burn up and become a new version of yourself, that painful process, maybe before you were just trying to snap through it, and again, there's a weird way in which Capricorn achievement comes in for Gemini in this part of life. You're just trying to get to the, I did it. I healed from it, I'm done. And maybe in the last several years, that it's become apparent how that doesn't work and how you have to kind of show up still with that part of you present that can work with what you've got and heal from something, but also ready to take it seriously and not try to just get it done as fast as possible with as little effort as possible. I hope that's not insulting, but that does feel like the Gemini Capricorn 8th house to me. All right. Taurus and Taurus rising. Capricorn 9th house. So for Taurus and Taurus rising, having Capricorn characterize your 9th house is having the discipline and ability to work through things with what you've got applied to your growth and your spiritual expansion. So the 9th house is the house of travel, and it's the house of higher education. It's the house of publishing, and it's the house of God. It's the house of spirituality. So depending on where you are in life, sometimes you might experience the 9th house as being primarily about how you learn new things. And then sometimes you might experience the 9th house as your spirituality, like flat out. Like you find all of your spiritual growth in the 9th house. All of it may be a little of an overstatement, but you find a lot of it in the 9th house. So it feels a little different depending on where you're coming from. But for a person who's very spiritually oriented, which we who are into astrology often are, this is a way of experiencing spirituality that is very focused on achievement. I'm getting it done. I'm moving to the next level. I'm understanding. Again, we can kind of see with Gemini, that business-like approach is happening in the realm of healing. And for Taurus and Taurus rising, that business-like approach comes in when it has to do with our spiritual growth and how we are learning more and becoming larger, incorporating more into ourselves. In the last several years, Taurus and Taurus rising, if you notice I'm saying we and our, it's because I'm a Taurus rising. In the last several years, Taurus and Taurus rising have been letting go of and releasing, again, achievement for achievement's sake, adding another notch to the I get it list that you have going. And also like, I'm trying to think from the perspective of somebody who's a little less like deep into the spirituality end of it. So Taurus and Taurus rising might also experience this as letting go of, traveling for the sake of checking something off your list, going to school for the sake of saying you did it, right? Those kinds of things are things that we've been letting go of. And then we've been finding ways to bring that growth in for our own sake, for the sake of our expansion. And we still can bring the Capricorn genius for like getting it done to that expansion. But we're not doing it so much just to do it in the way that we were before this South Node transit. I don't know, guys. Sometimes I say stuff and I'm like, maybe that's literally just me. I'm not sure if I'm doing a great job, but it is me, and maybe it's you too. All right. So Taurus and Taurus rising is what we just did. And now we're going to Aries and Aries rising. Capricorn characterizes your 10th house of career and reputation and the way you show up in the world. This is not always the way that we make money. And if you're younger, like in your 20s, it often isn't the way that you make money because you might have started a job that isn't necessarily related to how you are received in the world and the way that people experience the fruits of your existence. If you listen to the podcast, you've heard me use this word fruits and fruiting about the 10th house a lot. But basically, you know, I talked about how the fourth house is the root of the whole chart. The 10th house is the fruit. So you're expressing yourself in the fifth house. That's the self-expression. But then the way that it ends up fruiting into the world, the way that the seed of you blossoms, you see that happen in the 10th house. So ideally, that does end up being something about your career. It's what you're able to do every day. And maybe you even make money off of it. Or maybe it is your passion and what you care about the most, and you don't make money off of it. But regardless, it is the way that people end up receiving your existence. We could say it's the way people end up seeing you, but obviously the first house has a ton to do with that too, because that's your identity and the way you're perceived. And then even the third house comes into the way you're seen, right? You're seen from different angles by different people in your life. But the 10th house is where the public sees you. It's where everybody sees you. It is what is visible about who you are. So for an Aries or Aries rising, that is characterized by Capricorn. The capacity to get things done, the capacity to provide structure and be the one who says, this is what we need to do, this is how we're going to do it. What do we have available? How are we going to make it happen? That's what shows up to the world in the Aries personality. In the last several years, you have been letting go of ideas about what that's supposed to be or patterns in the way that that works that just don't function anymore. So again, I've been saying this a lot in this segment, but achievement for achievement's sake, or working so much that you're not receiving the fruits of your work, feeling like you're supposed to stay busy all the time, those are things that Aries and Aries risings have been letting go of as the South Node has been in Capricorn. Plus, there's the many years long excavation and tearing down of the lies we tell ourselves that's been going on in Capricorn with Pluto there. And Saturn has been moving through this part of your life for several years and has been bringing you to terms with the limits and the restrictions and the reality of your mortality that affect your career. Also, a Saturn transit through the 10th house, if you're sort of on track and you are showing up in the world with your full self, right? A Saturn transit can get you really focused on what you're doing. And if you're not showing up to the world in authenticity, like as who you truly are and sharing your deepest self, then a Saturn transit through that house can create real problems that you're forced to deal with, basically. Pisces and Pisces rising. Capricorn characterizes the 11th house of social circle and community. I always love thinking of the patterns in the way we look at whole sign houses, and a water sign always has a earth 11th house. So the watery personality is always finding containment in the social circle, and an earth sign always has a water 11th house. So the earthy, grounded, kind of dry personality, the sort of self-absorption of the earth energy, then finds like nourishment and watering in the social circle. So for a Pisces to have this Capricorn energy characterizing their 11th house of social circle and community means that they find containment, they find structure in the people that they spend their time around, associate with, and are in community with. It can mean, a lot of Capricorns show up in your social circle and community because you're seeking that containment, that being heldness. And it also can mean that there is sort of a Capricornian vibe to the group of people you hang out with. Maybe that grim sense of humor is very prevalent there, or, Capricorn stuff. In the last several years, as the South Node has been moving through Capricorn, you have been releasing stuff around how you relate to your community, how you show up in community. And I'm thinking this through right now about what that means for Pisces, because I've continually throughout the rest of these sign readings been saying, letting go of achievement for achievement's sake, remembering that you're not supposed to stay busy all the time, that you actually do need downtime. And as I'm thinking about how that shows up for a Pisces 11th house, it feels like it is relating to not running around trying to keep a social calendar occupied, not necessarily not looking for people who are going to tell you, who are going to be harsh with you, but people who can contain you. So obviously Capricorn, I haven't talked about this at all, but Capricorn can be a really harsh sign, right? It's a get down to business, take care of your shit kind of a sign. And when it is functioning well and it has enough of the water end of things, it knows that it wants to take care of business, take care of shit, because it cares about people, right? But when it doesn't have enough water, when it's really, really dry, it's almost just annoyed with the whole world for not understanding how to do this, right? So for a sensitive Pisces, I'm sorry, I was about to call you a sensitive little Pisces, but for that sensitive Pisces spirit, if you've had a lot of people in your life who have been on that really harsh end of the Capricorn characterization and not so containing and supporting, that might be something you've been letting go of as well. Okay. If you're an Aquarius or Aquarius rising, Capricorn characterizes your 12th house. Once again, I'm going to point out that this is a cadent house, so it is not as easily understood. None of the cadent houses are. And then the 12th house is the house of the unseen, the karmic past, and the collective unconscious, the connection to the collective unconscious. So it is especially not easy to see in ourselves. So that's worth thinking about. Having Capricorn characterize your 12th house as an Aquarius or Aquarius rising means that this Capricornian achievement, Capricornian getting down to business, grimness, awareness of mortality forms like the baseline code of your identity as an Aquarius. Aquarius traditionally is a Saturn ruled sign. So when we come into Aquarius energy, we're thinking more about the responsibility to the collective. When we're in Capricorn, we're thinking more of the responsibility to ourselves. The responsibility to the self that Capricorn represents is like the coding that results in the Aquarian responsibility to the collective. The Aquarian understands responsibility to the self in its unconscious and then reflects that in responsibility to the community in its identity. That is probably the best I have ever explained a 12th house in this whole series. It's not easy to explain a 12th house. So in the last several years, as we've been experiencing all these transits in Capricorn and the South Node in Capricorn, you have been releasing anything that doesn't work, unhealthy Capricorn themes in the realm of this code, this underlying coding of who you are, which means you probably haven't been super able to describe how that's been working or super even conscious of how it works. But what it means is that sense of responsibility to yourself, which is quite unconscious to you, has been just dumping stuff out that doesn't work anymore. So if in your sense of responsibility to yourself, your unconscious sense of responsibility to yourself, you were sort of unconsciously moving towards checking off boxes, getting stuff done for the sake of getting it done, or keeping yourself busy all the time without making room for what you really need in life, then that's been getting sort of let go. It's been falling out the drain in your 12th house. Have you known it was happening? Not necessarily, but you have felt it. We can feel these 12th house transits even when we can't describe them. And so for an Aquarius or Aquarius rising, that feeling of like, ugh, it's getting like dumped out has been happening in a part of you that's very difficult to explain, but it's there. Also, Pluto moving through Capricorn, Pluto moving through this 12th house since 2008 for years and years and years, has been excavating all of the nasty stuff in this unconscious part of who you are. And I don't remember off the top of my head when Pluto is moving into Aquarius. It's going to be years from now. Oh, 2024. That's when it's happening. So at that point, all that stuff that's been happening in your unconscious for an entire era of your life, then you'll be able to see it unfolding in your personality. And I know that that doesn't sound like great, but I think it's good. I think a lot of this stuff that you've been processing unconsciously, when Pluto moves into your first house, you're going to know what it means, and that's going to be helpful. Okay, that is it for the sign readings for this week. I hope you enjoyed this video, and not video if you're listening to it on the podcast. And if you did, like and subscribe, because I'm trying to get it moving in different platforms. It would be great to have YouTube subscribers as well. So, and listen to the podcast if you haven't listened to the podcast. It's good, I think. I don't know. I actually don't know how good this one is going to be, but we'll see. Okay, thanks. Talk to you soon.